Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. How are you doing today, buddy?
Doing good. Did a little shift this morning, got home, and had a land of 10 shift, wrote a bunch of stuff, and now I'm here talking Big Ten football with you, so I cannot complain. How about you?
Well, after about 10 minutes of me waiting to get my GPS all figured out, then we can actually start the show. So, yeah, we had a little small talk before the show today. That's how my day is going. My GPS is on drugs. It doesn't know what it wants to do. That's what happens when you drive around the middle of nowhere. That's where my territory is. So I'm coming to common ground here shortly. But what a week, Kevin. I mean, the big game, of course, Penn State, Iowa in the Big Ten. If you didn't watch it, you had to at least hear about it. And Penn State had all they could handle going to Kinnick Stadium with Iowa, but some other things going on in the top 10. We're going to talk about that like we do every week on the show. We're going to go through the AP top 10, because if you and I went through the top 25, this show would turn out to be about 2 hours long. So we're going to go through the top 10. Some things going on there, some movement, some losses, and then we're going to definitely talk about the Big Ten games. We're going to talk about the upcoming schedule. And yes, Kevin, the cupcake schedule done, over, kaput. The wrappers are in the garbage. It's Big Ten time. Now, I know there's going to be like some off weeks where they have a non-conference, but to me, this is what it's all about. This is now what I've been waiting for. The first 4 weeks are done, over. Truly Big Ten football, and I don't care if it's, the number one team versus the worst team in the conference. It's still Big Ten football, and Iowa just proved it is hard to go on the road and play in the Big Ten. But I'm going to turn it over to you, go through the top 10. I'll probably interrupt you a time or two.
I'm sure you will. But before I get into the top 10, Troy, I wanted to mention the Nebraska athletic director situation. They fired Sean Eichhorst earlier this week, who hired Mike Riley, who is currently the Nebraska head coach, who a lot of people want fired because he is not doing squat with the Nebraska football program. And so Eichhorst got fired, and they named their interim athletic director actually a few hours ago, the one we're recording this on a Tuesday. And the interim athletic director is a guy named Dave Rimington. And for college football fans, you may know the name Rimington because of the Rimington Trophy, which goes out annually to the best center in college football. So that's who this trophy is named after, is Nebraska's new interim athletic director. And I have to say interim, and I have to say this along with it, that his interim tag only applies for 60 days. No longer than that. And he was even asked, hey, you're the interim guy. You've got 60 days. Do you want to be the head guy? The main athletic director, the permanent athletic director, after your 60 days are up as the interim. And he said, no. No, I'm not. I forgot what exactly he is, like the president of some fairly big organization as it is right now. I forgot to check it out again because I forgot. It escaped my mind. But regardless, he's doing stuff. He's supposedly a really good guy, good at what he does. People applaud him, and just people like him in general. And Mike Riley, the head coach at Nebraska earlier today, actually said about Dave Remington that he is a perfect guy. Now, I don't know about you, Troy, but I myself am not a perfect guy. I wouldn't say my dad is a perfect guy. I wouldn't say my future son, if I have one, will be a perfect guy. I don't think you even, Troy, even though I like you very much, you're probably not.
I'm far from perfect. What are you talking about? I was born imperfect. So, I'm not even close. I'd have to have a lot of work done to become perfect. But I guess there's a perfect guy in the world.
Yeah, you can either say that Dave Remington's a perfect guy, or you can think that Mike Riley's blowing something up someone's, or blowing smoke up someone's something.
Here's the thing, though, Kevin. He's the interim coach. or the interim athletic director. I don't think Mike Riley has anything to worry about with him at the helm. But
right.
when the new AD is hired, yeah, he's definitely got something to worry about. So I want to be blowing smoke up the ADs, but I'd be more worried about the boosters and probably like the chancellor and other people in that university that are going to be making these decisions, not the interim athletic director that does not want anything to do with that position at this point. So I don't know what Riley's saying. I mean, this guy could be a good guy for all I know. I don't know. I don't know much about him. But Nebraska certainly athletically, and not just football 4 games into the season. You look at all their athletics and probably underachieving in many aspects when it comes to playing in the Big Ten. I mean, when Nebraska moved over to the Big Ten, Kevin, I was pretty excited, thinking, man, this is going to be a team that'll be always competing near the top. It's Nebraska football. Well, basketball, I knew, it's basketball. But football, I thought for sure that they would be near the top of their division every year. It's Nebraska football, and they've been far from it the past few years.
Yeah, they haven't been fantastic the last few years. That's for sure. Just under Mike Riley, and this has started in 2015. He went 6-7 his first year. It's your first year, whatever. Second year goes 9-4. That was last year. So that's an improvement. But this year 2-2. I think the way Nebraska finished last year had people questioning, and then going into this year, it seems to me anyway, and I don't know Riley from the next guy, I guess, but it seems to me like he's on a short leash, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't. Bo Pelini consistently, I mean, throughout Bo Pelini's career at Nebraska, which lasted 7 seasons, if I'm counting right, he lost 4 games every single year. He went 9-4, 10-4 every single year, and he got fired. So Nebraska obviously believes they're an 11-win, 12-win program, should be competing for Big Ten titles year in, year out, should be on the national scene near the top 10, pushing for college football playoff appearances. Obviously, if you fire a guy who loses 4 games a year, goes 9-4, 10-4, every single year. So Riley comes in, loses 7 games. That's obviously a red flag. Then he goes 9-4, and now this year already 2-2, seemingly not going to push for a Big Ten title, obviously. And just a week ago, they hosted Rutgers and won by 10 points. And typically, if you're a really good Big Ten team, like an Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, you'll see those teams just roll over Rutgers, and that's exactly not what Nebraska did. I think Mike Riley obviously isn't necessarily probably the perfect guy to get this program to 11, 12-win seasons consistently and pushing for top 4 spots to compete for national titles. It doesn't seem like he's on that trajectory, but I don't think he's doing a terrible job. I just think he's not living up to the expectations of what Nebraska fans have for him. And like you said, I don't think Remington in the end is going to have one say or another with Riley. It's going to be whoever takes over as the official athletic director.
So let me ask you this, Kevin. Is it unfair? You talked about Bo Pelini. 9-4 is nothing to, be all upset about. But is there a mystique? Is there an expectation of Nebraska football based on history that they want 10 or 11 wins? And is it realistic? Is it fair to the coaches to put that expectation that you should be a double-digit win team every year?
I don't think so at all. The last time this team won 11 games was 2001. That's the last time they did it. Bill Callahan never did it. He was the coach before Pelini. Frank Solich in 2001 is the guy who led Nebraska to 11 wins. He did that once. 97, the team went 13-0 under Osborne, and that was his final year. And so it's like, okay, well, obviously Osborne, Tom Osborne, everyone knows the name Tom Osborne. So he did his thing forever. For 24, 25 years, I think it was. he obviously had the program rolling in the late 90s, but after that, it's just like, okay, Frank Solich's first year, 9-4. Then he goes 12-1, but then 10-2, 11-2, 7-7, 10-3. Then he's done. Callahan comes in. He never gets to 10 wins. Bo Pelini gets to 10 wins a few times. That's not seen as good enough. It just seems like Nebraska's chasing history, and I think that now more than ever, with how every single team in a power conference gets on national television, whether it's online, whether it's Big Ten Network, Big Ten, BTN to go, all of these teams can be seen, and so you don't have to go to Nebraska when they were rolling. You don't have to go to Alabama right now. You don't have to go to Ohio State. You don't have to go to Clemson to be seen on national television more than once a year. You can go to Purdue and be seen somewhere every single week. It doesn't matter what Power 5 school you are. And so I think that just in general, if you don't have to go to the middle of the country, if that doesn't suit you as an 18-year-old, if you want to go to the West Coast, the East Coast, up north, if you're an offensive lineman and you love the cold, or if you're a quarterback and you want to stay in the South, or you're a pass rusher from Georgia and you want to stay close to home and you don't want to move to Nebraska, I think that the state of Nebraska holds a decent amount of solid prospects. But I think you need really good coaching if you just own the state of Nebraska and the states around Nebraska to really be a top 4 contender. I feel like in today's day and age, you have to pull kids from California, from Texas, from Florida, from wherever. So I just think Nebraska doesn't have a ton of draws to it just based on geographic location. I don't think you can say, hey, we won a few national titles 20 years ago. You can't say you're on TV more than the average team. It's just we're a Big Ten school now after being a Big 12 school for a while. We had success in the late 90s. But, again, to these kids, I mean, that's when these kids were born. It's the late 90s. So once you're recruiting them, so, I mean, they don't remember Nebraska football tradition. It means nothing to them. So I just think that in today's day and age, if you're a Nebraska fan and you're just dying for 11, 12-win seasons and to go back to the good old days of the late 90s where you're pushing for national titles, I just think those days are long gone. They're 20 years gone. That was 20 years ago.
Kevin, I bet you if you went to a high school student right now, any high school across America, and polled football players and asked them who Tom Osborne was, I bet you only half would know.
Yeah. Yeah,
the ones that are football fans,
right,
that really dive into it probably know of Tom Osborne. Heck, even casual fans may not even know who Tom Osborne is. I mean, you have to be honest, outside of college football, what do you really do? Not a whole lot. But I would imagine, Kevin, that you can't. And the reason I ask that question is because I think it happens in all aspects of life, not just football. We set expectations so high based on history, and that's fine. You can set things based on history, but when it was so long ago that they won a national championship, maybe you should start with finding a coach that's going to build a foundation. Build a foundation and an identity for Nebraska in the Big Ten. That's what they need to do. I've talked about it on this show before. Everybody knows what Wisconsin's going to do to you. They're going to have big, burly linemen. They're going to have an average to mediocre quarterback. They're going to have a running back that just comes out of nowhere, and they're going to play hard defense and knock the snot out of you. That's what Wisconsin does. They're not going to come out and they're not going to go into the spread offense and run fly routes all day. They're going to run the football down your throat. I don't know what Nebraska's identity is, Kevin. You tell me Nebraska, and I'm like, okay, some good players, a middle-of-the-pack team. But What are they going to do to you this week? You don't know. You're an Ohio State guy. You know the identity of Ohio State. People know what the identity of Michigan is. People know identity of teams. Nebraska does not have an identity. That's where they need to start. So they need to erase, well, we're a 10, 11, 12-win team. Maybe you are, and that's where you want to be. That's fine. But let's be real about this. What is your identity to get there? Paul Chryst can do it at Wisconsin with his identity, because that's what he goes out and recruits for. You bring another coach in with that identity in Wisconsin, it's not going to have the same result. So you need to find a coach, and you need to let that coach build an identity. Honestly, Kevin, Riley hasn't done it. I think he should be gone. He hasn't built an identity. So, and I'm not saying that I'm hating on Riley. It's just when somebody mentions, well, what is Nebraska to you? Middle of the pack Big Ten team, because that's what they are. So that's all I have there.
No, yeah, I'll finish it up. If someone were to ask me what Nebraska is, I think they get solid athletes from time to time. I think they have very average quarterback play in recent history. I think you've got some talent in running backs at times. You know, usually they'll have one good receiver. Defensively, you've got a couple names here and there that stand out, maybe get drafted one or two every year. They're a solid program. You're going to see them around the top 25 usually. And that's kind of what I just remember of recent history. And that's kind of what, just looking at even a year ago, 9-4, not 2 years ago, but 3 to around 10 years ago, again, under Bo Pelini, 9-4, 10-4. You're around the top 25, basically, is what that means. You're a good team. You're just not great. You're not pushing the top 10 on a consistent basis. So I think they're fine. I think they're a solid program. And if people around Nebraska understood, like, hey, we're a 10-win team, and occasionally if we pull a few recruits here and there and we get the right players to fit the system perfectly, maybe we'll have a Michigan State-esque run of winning the Big Ten a couple years in a row, or 3 times in 5 years or something like that. That can be done, but you need to have a guy like Mark D'Antonio who recruits guys for his system and is a good coach and has good assistants around him, and things just have to work perfectly. You can't rely on Michigan's tradition, Alabama's tradition, Ohio State's tradition. The school that reminds me the most of Nebraska, maybe not necessarily identity-wise, but is Notre Dame, in that they think they should be competing for national titles and top 4 spots every year, and they can call themselves NBC's team because they're on NBC all the time. But again, 15, 20 years ago, that meant something. But now you can watch every single Power 5 team every single week if you really try to, one way or another. So it doesn't mean a ton to be NBC's team anymore. That meant something 20 years ago. Now it doesn't. It just doesn't hold the same weight. So I just think that Nebraska fans in general, and I'm glad you asked the question, Troy, of what Nebraska football is to me, and are expectations unrealistic? To me, they don't really have an identity. I'm with you. They're a solid program, nothing more, and they just rely on 20 years ago plus history of the program in which they think they should be pushing for college football playoff spots year in, year out, and they just haven't been. And to be honest, they probably shouldn't be unless they've got a top 5-ish coach at Nebraska. But that's all I've got on it. I will finally move into the top 10. Not a ton of changes in general. I said a week ago that, to me, the top 10 teams are kind of in the top 10. And then TCU beat Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State was ranked number 6, so they're gone. And Georgia moved up from number 11 to 7. There is no top 10 team outside of Oklahoma State that left the top 10 other than Ohio State, but Ohio State dropped from 10 to 11, so it's not this huge drop. Again, nobody lost other than Oklahoma State. So I guess they kind of proved me to be stupid, I suppose. I believed in Oklahoma State. TCU hung 44 points on them, and that was that. But at number 1, Alabama stayed at number 1, Clemson stayed at number 2, Oklahoma stayed at number 3, Penn State stayed at number 4, USC stayed at number 5. Washington moved up from 7 to 6, replacing Oklahoma State's spot. Georgia moved up from 11 to 7. That was, I guess, the next big mover in the Big Ten. Georgia beat number 17, I think it was, Mississippi State, 31-3. So that was impressive. I do think Mississippi State's a top 25 team, and to get crushed by Georgia, I think means something. I think Georgia's a strong football team. They're ranked number 7 now. Michigan was ranked 8 a week ago. They're ranked 8 again. TCU moved up from 16 to 9. That's probably the big mover, again, after they beat Oklahoma State. Wisconsin moved back from 9 to 10, and I guess I'll call it the top 11. Ohio State dropped from 10 to 11. Again, 4 Big Ten teams in the top 25, all within the top 11 now.
Yep. So my good old Wisconsin boys don't play a game, and now they fall again. So here's the thing. I'm only bringing it up. Again, I'll say this. I don't think they're a top 10 team, and I think the season will provide that. But I look at it and say, okay, you're idle, and now all of a sudden you're not as good as you were a week ago. Well, I understand Georgia won. I understand TCU won. And it's a big game for TCU to beat number 6. But you have these guys, and all of a sudden, like even Ohio State, Kevin, they just took care of business. They took care of business, and they fall because they took care of business because other teams won. And now, granted, I think Georgia, that win was definitely impressive. That was definitely impressive. Did they deserve to move into the top 10? Certainly. TCU might be the other question. Did they deserve the top 10? Yeah, so now you got to move somebody out, and I guess, Ohio State and Wisconsin are the ones on the brink of the top 10, so they're going to be the ones that move down. I can understand that. And TCU, they looked impressive doing it, Kevin. But I said last week when Oklahoma State moved up that far, and you can probably remember me because I got my voice going, they beat a poor Pittsburgh team. That it didn't get any better this week for Pittsburgh, and now they have a quarterback controversy. They have a quarterback competition going on in the middle of the season to see who's going to start at quarterback. They're a young team. So that impressive Oklahoma State victory over Pitt, I told you last week, meant nothing, at least to me. I expected Oklahoma State to do that, and they got rewarded big time. And so hindsight is 20/20, right? So you should have moved Oklahoma State up a bit, but maybe not into the top 10. And so that's why I look at this TCU move, Kevin, and the only reason they moved up is because they moved Oklahoma State last week, in my mind, prematurely, even though I thought they were better than Wisconsin. Where you had them ranked, you prematurely moved them all the way up. And you didn't make them prove it. That's another problem. So now another week, another problem that I have with the voters. It's like they get all lovey-dovey in 1 week. Now, Georgia, again, they moved up, 5 spots? Is that what they moved up, Kevin?
From 11 to 7, 4 spots.
So 4 spots. Not too bad. They beat another top 25 team. But when you look at it, it's almost like you get lovey-dovey when you see these games, and, man, a team crushes another team, like the Oklahoma State win, and then they're going to reward them, and they should have made them prove it. Because, again, the week before, as voters, you had them down there, because where was Oklahoma State, 15, 16 or something like that? So
15. 6 to 15.
Yeah, 15, and you moved them all the way up to 6 because they had this impressive win over a mediocre team because their offense looked great. Well, here's rocket science for everybody out there. If you're playing against Pitt, your offense is going to look great because their defense isn't good. And I'm not saying it. I live in Pitt. I cheer for Pitt. I actually do. I watch the games. I cheer for Pitt. They're just not good this year. You got to be real. And those that want to be unrealistic, fine. Sit in your corner, be unrealistic, but Pitt is not a good football team this year. Just not good. That's all I have there about this movement in the top 10, Kevin. I look at it, and I just don't like how these voters prematurely, because they watch a game or they see a box score, and it's an impressive one, and then they move teams up, umpteen million spots because they think, this team, they should be in the talk. Make them prove it. I can see moving up. Like Georgia, I can see that. 11 into the top 10, fine. But this is going back to last week and on my thing, that big move by Oklahoma State. Do I think they're a top 10 team? Yes, I do. And I still think they are. Even though TCU took care of business. But you can't have them both there. And is TCU a top 10 team? I don't know. You moved them up a lot of spots. Now, again, is it the right move? In my book, Kevin, no. It's prove it again next week. Then we'll move you up 1 or 2 spots again. Maybe I'm old school, because if you think back, and this is long, probably before you were born, Kevin, the top 25 was hard to get movement in. When you go back and look at polls from the 80s and the 90s, not a lot of movement when there was winning. Even when you beat a top 25 team, you didn't move a lot. And so maybe it's the generation. Maybe it's that feel-good generation, those millennials. But their millennials aren't voting on this, I don't believe, Kevin. It's older guys like me. I don't know what's going on.
I was going to say.
I just see a change. Because when I was growing up, you really literally looked at the top 25 to see how many spots your team moved up after a big victory, not 9 or 10. It was like, did they move up 2 or 3 spots? And the only way you made movement in the top 10 is if you played and beat another top 10 team. There wasn't a lot of movement. There wasn't a lot of jiving going on. And in today's top 25, there's a ton of jiving going on. That's all I got.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to a point I made earlier that all these games can be seen, and a point I made a week ago that just because you're the athletic director at Washington doesn't mean you're going to see every single TCU game. And so if you're voting in this as the AD of Washington or some random, and it's not going to be some random booster, but someone who obviously cannot watch every single game every single week, and you see TCU blast Oklahoma State, it's like, whoa, they're not the 16th best team in the country. They deserve to be in the top 10. So after watching them one time this year, I'm sure people just vaulted them up 7, 8, 9 spots, hence why they went up 7 spots from a week ago. And it also has to be noted that, again, this is based on a points system, the way the Associated Press poll works. Last week, Wisconsin had a total of 1,031 votes. That's just based on where they're ranked by numerous Associated Press pollsters. And this week they had 1,023 votes. So they lost 8 points, I guess, in total. And TCU is actually ahead of Wisconsin by 5 points. And just to put it in perspective, they're behind number 8 Michigan by 60 points. And Ohio State trails Wisconsin by 7 points. And right behind Ohio State, number 12 Virginia Tech, they trail Ohio State by 190 points. So just because you're a spot behind TCU doesn't necessarily mean everyone in the world thinks TCU is better. I mean, it could have come down to literally one more voter thinking TCU was better than Wisconsin. If they had flip-flopped it, you would see Wisconsin stay at number 9 based on all these different voters, just on how the point system works. So you can't, I guess, necessarily bash the entire poll for saying, whoa, TCU is number 9. I think that's a little high. Well, they're actually just 12 points ahead of Ohio State. They could very easily have been number 11. It would have been quite a jump to move up to number 8 for them. But, you know, for any team right now, even for Virginia Tech to pass Ohio State, it would take, like I said, 190 points, which is a lot. If Wisconsin jumped 190 points, they would be, let me see here, I want to do the math, they would be number 6 in the country. That's the difference. From 12 to 11 is the same difference as number 10 to 6, is how the voters see it. The voters see the top 11 teams are pretty close to each other. Number 11 to number, I would say, 5 or 6 or so is pretty crammed. But after the top 11, there's a huge drop-off. That's just the way the point system works. That's the nerdiness, I guess, in me and the way to look at it. But that's just the way it is for this week. I'm sure after next week, another couple teams will be upset, and there will be more movement. We will find out eventually next week when you guys join us, because you obviously will, since we are the best show running out there, obviously, Troy. So I will get to...
Hey, toot our horn, dude. Toot our horn. You know what we're talking about.
We do.
You know,
we have an idea.
Yeah, every once in a while we know what we're talking about, I think. So yeah. I want to add to this, Kevin. Like, so Oklahoma State loses. You, as a voter, and like you said, I know it's a point system, but these voters that put them up there, I'm sure TCU got some votes as like the 7th or 8th best team in the country.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine they have. But again, it's that feel-good story like, oh, okay, they beat the number 6 team. They deserve to be 6. No, they don't. And Oklahoma State dropping as far as they did, I don't understand that. But again, this whole Oklahoma State thing to me is all, if I'm Oklahoma State, I'm actually probably kind of jacked off. Because where you had me in that wonderful preseason poll, as I air quoted, the voters do this to themselves. I mean, come on now. Get some stability in there. Because as a voter, you have to look at the team. Okay, every team can have a bad week, and I'm gonna kind of segue this into where we're gonna go with this. Penn State, Iowa. Penn State didn't move at all, did they, Kevin? They're still number 4.
Correct.
Are they the 4th best team in the country? They struggle with Iowa. And if they would have lost, they certainly wouldn't be sitting at 4. But to me, as a voter, I've got to take that into consideration outside that they just put a W next to their name, that they went in, and where's Iowa in this poll, Kevin? Where the hell is Iowa? Last I checked, they're undefeated. They still haven't cracked the top 25.
Well, they lost to Penn State. They've got the loss to Penn State.
They lost to Penn State on a last-second touchdown.
Right. So they're receiving votes. They're outside the top 25. They would be ranked number 31 if it went out that far.
I'm just saying. They were undefeated going into that game. They lost to the number 4 team in the country. And so people are going, oh, you got an L next to your name. This is the part of it. I'm like, do these voters, I'd like to talk to a voter once. Do you actually take into consideration what Iowa did against a very good Penn State team? They had them on the ropes. They had them sweating. I am sure inside James Franklin's blood pressure was probably like 300 over 200. Going, what the heck is happening here in Kinnick Stadium? And I don't think they do. I think they look at the end result, and they don't look that Iowa had a very good game plan against a very good Penn State team. Could they do that next week if they had to play Penn State again? Maybe not. But in the game that mattered, they hung right there, punch for punch like a heavyweight fight. And at the end, they got knocked out. They didn't have enough stamina. But, man, you got to give them credit for what they did. And I honestly think even after losing to Penn State that Iowa should have been a top 25 team. Even though they have the loss. They played them right to the last second. It's not like they lost by 14 and scored a mop-up touchdown to make it a 14-point game. They played them very well and very easily could have gotten a win. To me, that deserves votes. Maybe I'm just an old man that's crazy on a cloud, Kevin, but that's my thought. What do you think?
No, I'm glad you brought this up, and I had to do a little research for it while you were talking, but Iowa did receive more votes than they did a week ago. They had 2 votes a week ago. They would have been ranked like 40th. And so this week they got, 20-something votes, 16 votes. So they picked up more votes after losing. Now they moved up, quote-unquote, in the poll. Even though they're not ranked, they're getting more recognition. They actually gained points by losing. So I give the AP voters complete props on that. I would have guessed that they would have dropped votes. And so to gain votes after a loss, hats off to the AP voters that gave them votes, basically.
Still think they should be in the top 25, though. Every voter should have put them in the top 25.
Yeah.
I mean, you just hung in there with the 4th-ranked team in the country. You hung in there with a potential it's not BCS anymore, college football playoff team. I mean, depending on what happens, I know they've got a lot of tough games. But right now, when you look at the playoff, they are one of the playoff teams. And this Iowa team almost beat them. To me, that's deserving of being a top 25 team because you had no blemishes on your record up to that point. None whatsoever. You just took care of business. You took care of business. You were undefeated going into that game. May have not been the best resume in the world, but, man, you hung in there with Penn State. So my props to Iowa. Any Iowa fans out there, I think your team deserves to be in the top 25. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I would agree. My last thing, I think the biggest crap of this week's poll is Penn State had 1,306 votes a week ago, and then if a ball goes off a receiver's hands the last play of the game, they would have lost, so they would have dropped like 8 spots. But because that guy caught the ball, and because they won, because the guy caught the ball, they moved down 2 points, which, again, 2 points means nothing, basically, in this poll. So they stayed at number 4, all because the guy caught a ball.
You could get me going right here. I'm going to let you sit because I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go about the 4 ranking. Because that's the flip side of what I just said about Iowa deserving to be in the top 25. I'm going to let you finish your thought, then I'm going to go.
No, I don't have a ton more. That's the biggest beef that I would have, is that all it would take is for one little finger of a defensive
Share your beef,
lineman.
youngster. Share your beef, youngster. Let it out. Let it out like the old man does. Why is it not sitting well with you that they only lost 2 points?
I'm not going to go on a tirade, but I'll say, because I do think Penn State still, even if the ball was tipped at the line of scrimmage and they would have lost, as opposed to the guy catching the ball, I still think Penn State's a really good football team who can beat anyone. I don't think one play, in my mind, changes a whole lot. I value Iowa more than I did a week ago. I don't value Penn State as much as I did a week ago. It has me questioning if Ohio State should be favored at home when they play Penn State this year. It got me thinking. So I don't know if Penn State is still the 4th best team in the country. I wouldn't bash them and drop them to number 8 because they had this scare. I don't necessarily think that, but it does get me thinking, like, okay, Penn State, maybe they're not the 4th best team. At least they didn't play like it for 1 week. And I guess that's the other thing I want to mention is, like, the Dallas Cowboys, for argument's sake, the Dallas Cowboys a week ago looked like garbage going to Denver. They look like an average team at best. Then last night they turn on the Jets in the second half, and they look like the Dallas Cowboys of old from a year ago. And it's like, oh, okay, the Dallas Cowboys, they righted the ship. They're a really good team again. Well, week to week, teams give you different performances, especially college teams, let alone lower levels. But we're talking about college football here. So maybe Penn State just had a little worse week than they really are, and that's fine. I don't think they should get hammered for it. It's just funny how if one pass gets tipped, as opposed to being caught in the end zone, Penn State would probably be number 12 right now, as opposed to number 4.
And see, here's the thing. People will say, wow, you're hating on Penn. I am not hating on Penn State, because if that would have happened, that would have been my tirade this week. It would have been like, how in the heck do you drop them that far?
Right.
You don't. But that's my problem with the whole inconsistency of these polls is, like you said, they got the W, so voters are going to keep them at 4. I even text this to you. I text this to you before the game was over about that. Or right when the game was over, about the poll and where they're going to be, and I thought they should drop. But not, they won. And so do I think they should have dropped? I think so. But, again, you look at who's behind them. You got USC. Do you want to really vault Washington that high up? I mean, I look at it from that perspective. And USC, they're also not, like, rolling along every week like Alabama is either.
No.
So there's questions with USC. So I would imagine, though, in some of these polls that USC is the 4th team, maybe even the 3rd team. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, again, like you said, they only lost 2 points. To me, you got to look at this whole game. You look at this whole game. And, yeah, did they have a bad week? Could they go out next week and just throw on the romp show? Sure, they could. They're that good. Barkley proved his case for the Heisman against Iowa. The man was phenomenal. The guy had a great game. Phenomenal. But again, too, was it that Penn State played poorly? Or can you tip your cap to Iowa's game plan and those young fellows over there that played their hearts out? To them, I've said this a number of times. I'm like an old cliche on this show. That was their Super Bowl, Kevin. That was their Super Bowl. If they can beat Penn State at Kinnick Stadium, that would have been their season. Can Iowa contend for their division title? Possibly. They've got a good young team. They've got a good team, solid team. But can they play like they did against Penn State week in and week out? That's the question. The Big Ten is so hard. You've mentioned that it could be the best or is the best football conference this year. And I think the point was just proven. It is so hard to go on the road and play in the Big Ten. I don't care if you're the fourth-ranked team going to an unranked team like Iowa. You go to another opposing stadium, and it is tough. It is tough to play. I mean, you got the lure of Camp Randall. You got the horseshoe. You've got all of these. I consider college football home field advantage probably more than any professional sport that's out there because it's the college campus, and it's not even mystique. It's just in the NFL, yeah, there's home field advantage. But, Kevin, you watched that Monday night game last night. How many Cowboy jerseys did you see? You know, you look at these games and you see teams where a third of the stadium is the opposing team. These college games, yeah, there's fans from the other team there, but I'm going to tell you what, those home crowds, those rowdy college kids, those student sections, they will outdo any NFL stadium on any given Sunday in that little area that they're at. And to me, that is a home field advantage. In college, when you play on the road, especially in the Big Ten, it is darn tough to go into an opposing stadium no matter what team. Well, outside, I guess I should preface this. Sorry, Rutgers. Sorry. But if you go to Rutgers, probably not the same allure. But the majority of teams, and I'm talking, I guess I should maybe preface it this way. The original Big Ten teams, Kevin. You go on the road to those stadiums, the Iowas, even the Minnesotas. Minnesota plays tough at home, Kevin. They're a tough home team. They're not an easy win when you go to Minnesota. But you look at what Iowa did and going to Wisconsin, going to Ohio State, going to Michigan State, going to Michigan. Those are tough places. And I think there's a true home field advantage in the Big Ten. What are your quick thoughts there?
I would completely agree. I'll just leave it at this. I'm not going to go deep into it because we have only got like 15, 20 minutes left on this show. This is the Big Ten show. I guess we don't have a time limit.
We got no time limits on this show, youngster. I know we do a ton of shows. It's hard to keep them straight. I mean, we got all confused last week. If you're an NFL fan, go check us out on Twitter, at Kid Cunny or at TroyRobert967. We have the link to an NFL show we did last week. It wasn't only previewing games. It was talking about NFL in general. And so we go off there. We do a 2-hour show. We're so used to time constraints for the radio that sometimes we forget. I forget, too, on this show. But this is the Big Ten podcast, so we don't have a time limit, youngster.
That is correct. I am I'm not sadly mistaken. I'm, I guess, happily mistaken. But I wanted to make the point before I transition over to getting over to the Week 4 games that you're absolutely right. At Nebraska, even now, I don't think would be easy. The only two teams who are not picked to win at home this week are Rutgers and Illinois. Those are probably the two worst teams in the Big Ten. Every other Big Ten team that's at home this week is favored. It's really that simple. And every team that's favored that's at home is at least 12-point favorites at home other than Michigan State. And Iowa's going into Michigan State, so Michigan State's favored by 3.5. I understand that. I think Iowa's a better team, but at Michigan State, it definitely means something, for sure, like you said. So Rutgers and Illinois are the only two home teams this week in the Big Ten that are not. I think that means something. But Week 4 for college football, I wanted to recap that, and I don't have, I guess, again, ton of stats to dive into and whatnot, but just a few notes from obviously the noteworthy games that I'll mention. And Ohio State beat UNLV 54-21. JT Barrett was out of the game after the first half. He threw 5 touchdown passes. He had, I think it was the second play from scrimmage, went to Paris Campbell. That was behind the line of scrimmage. He threw it to him, and he took it 69 yards. So JT Barrett gets a throw for 69 yards added to his stat sheet, but Paris Campbell did all the work. That's just the way sometimes stat sheets roll out. We mentioned on the show before, especially with JT Barrett, that give it to your playmakers and they can run 70 yards and make your stat line look good. That was part of it. Part of it was just playing UNLV.
So are you saying, youngster, that you don't believe that Barrett has the tools to play in the NFL?
To play in the NFL? No, I don't. And I love JT Barrett as a person and as a Buckeye fan. I think he's cool.
He's a great athlete. He's a great athlete, but I threw that out there sarcastically because I don't think he's a quarterback in the NFL either. Could he play somewhere else? Possibly. He's a good athlete, Kevin. You'll give him that much credit. I know you will. He's a good athlete, and he fits what Urban Meyer wants to do to a point. And we talked about this on a previous Big Ten show, that Urban Meyer doesn't recruit a 4 or 5-star traditional type quarterback. He recruits the guy that's going to fit in his system and run what he wants. And Barrett is doing that to a point. Could he do it better? Yes, he could. I think he's a good enough athlete that he may find another position somewhere in the NFL, Kevin.
I'll disagree. I think that Braxton Miller was easily a better athlete. Terrell Pryor was easily a better athlete. And again, there's nothing against J.T. Barrett. I love the guy, but he just has not, as a quarterback, definitely not going to make it. And his top-end speed, to me, is just not there. I don't know if he put on pounds and was trying to become a pocket passer, which I know he was from his, I think it was freshman year to sophomore year, either that or sophomore year to junior year, I forgot, when he just dropped a ton of rushing yardage and was like, you know what, I don't want to show that I'm this athlete playing quarterback. I want to show that I'm an athletic quarterback. That's what I think he went into during one offseason in particular. And I think he gained weight over that offseason. I think he got slower, and he wanted to become a better pocket passer, and it just never happened with his arm. And so, unfortunately, I just don't think he straight up makes it in the NFL anywhere. And I'm an Ohio State fan. Again, I love J.T. Barrett, but I don't think he makes it the way Braxton Miller or Terrell Pryor do at other positions. That's my thought on Barrett.
You know he's going to get drafted just because he plays at Ohio State and he's putting up wins and he's, numbers. Now, scouts are more talented than us. They are much more knowledgeable than us. And if we're already seeing this from our perspective, I'm sure the scouts are too. So they're really going to look into it. But some team's going to draft him just because they're going to give him a chance. Yeah,
no question about it. I would agree with that 100%. The next game on my little list here that I have listed, I'm going to go through every game, obviously, but Penn State beat Iowa 21-19. We kind of talked about that game already. Saquon Barkley had, I think it was 40 touches in total for over 300 total yards. There was one over Atlanta 10 where I just got done doing a shift. We did an article about some AFC executive calling him the number one player in the draft, disregarding all the quarterbacks, saying he is better than Ezekiel Elliott was coming out of college, saying that he is better than Adrian Peterson in certain aspects, not all aspects, but certain aspects. Basically, he's getting a ton of love right now from not just, the Heisman people and Heisman hype, but NFL executives.
That's what prime time will do to you when you shine. I still think he's a good player. I'll say this, Kevin. His performance at Iowa definitely put him near the top of the Heisman voting. But to be, and I saw that too. I saw those remarks. He's not the number one player to be chosen in the draft. He's a good player, and he may be the best running back in the draft, but not number one overall. no way, no how.
No, I agree with you. I mean, you know how much I value quarterbacks. So I agree. I think after the franchise quarterbacks are taken, potential franchise quarterbacks are taken, and someone takes Barkley at number 3 or number 4 or number 5, I get it. I fully get it. If you think all the franchise quarterbacks are taken and you look at the rest of the board, yeah, take a running back who you think is going to dominate for 10 years. I fully understand that. I'm sure every NFL team would rather have Le'Veon Bell than Andy Dalton right now. I'm sure they would rather have Le'Veon Bell than any basically below average to worse than that quarterback. So unless you're a franchise quarterback, you want to have Le'Veon Bell, you want to have Antonio Brown, you want to have Richard Sherman, you want to have all these guys who are super talented, just not as impactful as quarterbacks. So to take a running back like this over a quarterback at number 1, you've got some balls. I'll say that much, because if you need a quarterback and you don't take one and you take a running back instead, and then you watch that quarterback become the next whoever, you look like an idiot, no matter who the running back is that you take, no matter what they do. That's just the impact of the quarterback position. So that's all I wanted to say there. Michigan went to Purdue and won 28-10. They were down 10-7 at halftime. They were only up 14-10 after 3 quarters. It took a while. Wilton Speight got hurt on a play, and Jim Harbaugh was not happy about it. And so John O'Korn came in, the backup. And a lot of Michigan fans coming into this game thought that O'Korn should be the starter. He came in once Speight got hurt, 18-26, 270 yards, a touchdown. Michigan looked a lot better with O'Korn leading the way. I don't know who the quarterback is going to be going forward. Jim Harbaugh doesn't even give depth charts and starting lineups to people in the press boxes of games who are covering them live. He doesn't even supply them with the active depth chart. So it's not sure as to who's going to be the starter going forward, but O'Korn looked a lot better and Michigan looked a lot better when he was in. Do you have anything on that game, Troy? 28-10, Michigan over Purdue on the road?
No, just again, it's tough in the Big Ten. Every week is a struggle. And again, you can throw the records out, throw rankings out. Playing in the Big Ten is tough. There's a few teams. Again, sorry, Rutgers. You know, there's a few teams where it could be considered a cupcake game. But a majority of these games, you can throw records out. A lot of rivalries. I mean, because the Big Ten's been around for so long, and I know other conferences have that too. But there's just something about the Big Ten that you can always be a little nervous when you're a favored team on the road. Because, again, that home field advantage in college, to me, is so important. And so it's so real. It really is. And you look at what happened. Yeah, quarterback change, played a little bit better. All right, well, we knew that we didn't know what Harbaugh was doing there anyway. And, you know, it's kind of odd that Harbaugh doesn't even give a depth chart. Never knew that. Thanks for bringing that up. It's just kind of odd. But, you know, this is the thing with Michigan, Kevin. And we've kind of alluded to this. We haven't really went in depth on Michigan much this year on this show. No. But Michigan, I think, is still trying to figure some stuff out. They lost so many guys to the NFL, but they have so many great recruits behind them, but they didn't play a lot of meaningful downs last year. And so you're trying to get this unit together to all play on the same page, and sometimes that takes a while. You know, a lot of people want to say, well, this guy was a 4-star recruit, a 5-star, he should be dominating. Well, the last I checked, you can individually dominate at your position, but even at the end of the day, playing football is a team sport. If I'm a defensive tackle and I'm a big guy in the middle and the guys on the outside are having problem getting pressure, well, if they're being manhandled one-on-one, well, now they can double down in the middle, and I may be the best defensive tackle in the world, but can they get by 2 guys? Can they slide the guard over and help me because, man, my guys on the outside are getting manhandled? They're not doing their job? That sucks for me if I'm a big-time DT in the middle because now they can double me. Same goes for the outside. If the guys in the middle or the guys around him aren't getting their job done, well, then they can give help over there. So a lot of times you have to look at the whole component. Yeah, there's dominating players that just dominate all the time. But, man, if you're getting double and triple team, you're not going to be as productive as you used to be because the other guys aren't doing their job. And so when you look at this Michigan roster, Kevin, a lot of great talent, but I don't think they've put it all together yet. We're seeing a lot of inconsistency, and that goes with a lot of new starters, a lot of new faces. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I kind of expected that because you lost so many guys to the NFL, and these guys didn't play a lot together. They need time to gel. This Michigan team will be a lot better 4 weeks from now. That, mark my word. They're just getting along now. They're winning right now, Kevin. In my mind, they're not winning team football. They're winning based on their individual skill level compared to the other teams they're playing, and that's what they're getting by doing it. Wait till this team puts it all together. They could be pretty darn good. Scares me that they have to play Wisconsin late in the year. I wish Wisconsin-Michigan could play tomorrow because I would like Wisconsin chances now against Michigan. I'm not sure if I like them 6 weeks down the road.
Yeah, and realistically, I'm counting it now, 8 weeks down the road. That's going to be tough. It's at Wisconsin, so that's good. But 8 weeks from now, this Michigan defense, I mean, you give up 17 points week 1, then 14, then 13, now 10 at Purdue, who we were talking about a week ago, has been pretty impressive this year. Even at 2-1, they lost to Louisville by a touchdown. But we were talking about how Purdue was pretty good. And then they lose 28-10 at home to Michigan. And so it's like, well, okay, this Michigan team is pretty dang good. And their defense is pretty dang good. And just from a pure points perspective, they're pretty dang good. And they keep getting better. And so like you said, Troy, individually, obviously very talented at every position. And you brought up the point where they hadn't played in meaningful downs, which is correct. A lot of them have not because 10 of them were backups a year ago. But giving up 17 points to Florida, and you play teams like Cincinnati and Air Force, you give up 14 and 13, and then you give up 10 on the road to Purdue. That Purdue offense is pretty good. And so to go on the road to Purdue and only give up 10 points is impressive. So I am more worried about this Michigan team being good when it counts now than I ever have been because the defense is obviously playing well. And if they do figure out their quarterback position with John O'Korn and he keeps playing well, this team could go undefeated. They could win the whole thing. And I didn't think they could to start the year. I think it comes down to quarterback play because I knew the defense would eventually get there like they were a year ago. But if O'Korn keeps playing really well and he's the guy going forward, that's when Michigan can truly be dangerous. So I absolutely think Michigan could do a lot of damage, is, I guess, my point in short. But to move on, UCF went on the road last week and played Maryland, and Maryland was 2-0, and UCF came away with a 38-10 victory, kind of, I guess, hurting the Maryland fans' of, hey, actually, Maryland could be the surprise team this year in the Big Ten college football. That's not necessarily the case, and Maryland lost their starting quarterback, I believe it was game 1, Mr. Tyrell Pigrome, and after that happened, then you got Kasim Hill, who was the back. And, of course, against UCF, he tears his ACL. So Maryland is now down to their third-string quarterback. So Maryland is in trouble.
Bad luck, some bad luck in Maryland for the Terps.
Yeah, it's not good to go down to your third-string quarterback unless you've got Cardale Jones and you're Ohio State and you've got all this talent around you. Then maybe you can win a national title. I just had to throw it out there because I'm a Buckeye fan. I will move on. Nebraska played Rutgers. Nebraska was at home. And, again, like I said before on the show, they won 27-17. It was not a beautiful victory whatsoever. They were up 14-10 at half. They were up 21-10 21-17 after three quarters. This game was not great for Nebraska. They won by 10, but again, you're at home against Rutgers. You should win by more than 10 if you're a good football team. I'll leave it at that. Indiana beat Georgia Southern 52-17, as Indiana should. And then Michigan State was at home to Notre Dame, and I said a week ago that I would probably pick Michigan State to win, even though Notre Dame was favored, and Notre Dame won by 20 points. They won 38-18. Michigan State is just not there yet, and they're not getting back to where they were a couple years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's just not – Michigan State's just not there. Notre Dame's, to me, probably a top 25 team. For whatever reason, they're still not in the top – oh, sorry, they're 22 now. They finally cracked the top 25 with that win, but I think Notre Dame's a good football team. I don't think they're great, but Michigan State losing by 20 at home to a good football team kind of has you thinking where this Michigan State team is going to end up, especially since their schedule only gets harder.
So Kevin, I'm going to say this. They lost to a good football team, but they pooed the bed. They had a great opportunity to go out and to prove who Michigan State was, and I think they pretty much proved it to me. They're going to be a mediocre team this year, and like you said, they got a pretty tough schedule. And this is unfair to D'Antonio because we talked about it a few weeks ago. If he flutters around that 500 mark, he's probably getting fired, and I don't think it's fair. But you know, you look at this game, Notre Dame more talented, but it was one of those games, Kevin, where it's like, man, Michigan State, oh man, you got a ways to go. People are impatient, and that's what we talked about this in the coaching situation a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I think it's not going to get much better when you look at their schedule. They're going to play teams as good, if not better, than Notre Dame. And I don't think Michigan State can compete with them right now, Kevin.
No, they play Iowa this week, then they travel to Michigan, then they travel to Minnesota. You get Indiana at home after that, but then you travel to play Northwestern, then you play Penn State, then you play Ohio State, and then you finish finally with Maryland and Rutgers. Hopefully, Michigan State is around 500 by the time they get to Maryland and Rutgers. I just don't know if that's going to be the case.
I see four wins in. I'll say 4 wins in there. The last two, maybe. We don't know what the season is going to hold. I mean, injuries and things of that nature. I see 4 victories in there. That's it. That's all I see for Michigan State in that Big Ten schedule. And again, does that mean that it's not a good program? No, they just don't have all the pieces. And they're not going to compete with the likes of a Notre Dame. Even, the Iowa game, I think Iowa's a good team. I don't think Michigan State's as good as Iowa. Now, can Michigan State win? It's the Big Ten. And the old cliche on any given Sunday, well, in college football, on any given Saturday, you got to play football. And you mentioned it earlier in this show. They're college kids. Can emotions play a part in it? Yeah. I was a college kid once. I played college athletics. Believe me, your emotions can really affect how you play, how you get up for a game. And when it's Big Ten football, you don't need any reason to get up for a game every Saturday. It's Big Ten football. Most of these games are rival games. That's just because they've played each other year in and year out. So I don't think Michigan State's good right now.
No, I don't think they are either. That's it for Week 4. So last part of this show is previewing Week 5, and there aren't a ton of huge games, I'll say that, but there are 6 games between 12 Big Ten teams. And so, like Troy said to start the show, it's finally truly Big Ten season where you're playing Big Ten opponents basically every single week. Occasionally, maybe 1 or 2 teams have one more non-conference game randomly snuck in there, but it's basically all Big Ten from here on out, which is great as a Big Ten fan to get to watch. And to start on Friday, Illinois hosts Nebraska on September 29th. Nebraska's favored by 6.5, and I don't know if that should be the case because of how Nebraska is not doing too well, and Nebraska is on the road, and Illinois
Kevin, it's Illinois.
Illinois can run the ball. Illinois can run the ball.
I know they can run the ball. But it's still Illinois.
I am not
it's at
too
Nebraska.
Sure Nebraska wins. No, it's at Illinois.
Oh, it's at Illinois.
It's at Illinois. Yeah, this is not going to be. I'll say it here. I'll pick Illinois. Nebraska's favored by 6.5. I will pick Illinois, and the rumblings of Mike Riley getting fired will turn into much more than rumblings. And having an interim AD who doesn't want to fire people, he literally said, "I'm not here to fire anybody." That's a quote from Remington.
So that means he's going to.
He might, especially if Nebraska loses to Illinois. I'll say that much.
He won't have a choice. He won't have a choice, Kevin, because those boosters will be all up in his grill. They'll be up in his grill being, do it now, get rid of him, get somebody else here if they lose to Illinois.
Yeah, and he can easily say, I'm the interim guy. I wasn't here to fire anyone, but this is just the way it is. I had to fire the coach, Mike Riley. This is not my guy. I'm the interim guy. I wasn't here to fire anyone, but it had to be done according to everyone. So it's pretty easy to play off if they do lose.
Well, it would have had to be done according to the guy that writes $1 million check. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to. And I mean, we got to be real about that. If they lose to Illinois, boosters are going to be on the phone. Like, I'm not supporting this program with a pathetic, and I shouldn't say that, and I don't want to disrespect Illinois. Illinois, not very good football team this year. Like you said, they can run the football, and they go out and play, but when you're talking about the likes of a Nebraska, it's not Illinois versus Rutgers. It's Illinois versus Nebraska, and Nebraska, and again, Kevin, we go back to it. One injury in the defense, and all of a sudden it seems like this team fell apart. Was that guy really the heart of the whole team? Because ever since that injury, this team has been in disarray. But we go back to it. If they lose at Illinois, I guarantee boosters are going to be on the phone saying, I'm not supporting this team. And no, he'll have no choice, like you said.
Yeah, Chris Jones, the cornerback for Nebraska, was seen as the most talented guy on the defense, but just because you lose a cornerback doesn't mean your program should go into eruption and be bad. That shouldn't be the case, but Illinois, again, at home, can run the football, can keep the ball away from Nebraska. They can turn over Nebraska, I think. I don't think Illinois is an average team. Like you said, I think they are a bad football team right now. I think they're getting better under Lovie Smith. I think they're finding guys. I think they have a freshman running back who's going to keep getting better. I think they're going to keep getting better. I'll say that about Illinois. But coming off a bye at home against the Nebraska team who is barely surviving against Rutgers at home a week ago, I seriously will pick Illinois. I'll put that on the bank, but not that I'm going to put money on it. I guess I shouldn't say that. But I will pick Illinois for this show and the show's purposes. Finally, to move to Saturday, 5 Big Ten games. Ohio State at Rutgers. Ohio State's favored by 29 points. It should probably be more than 29 points. There's nothing for me to talk about, and this is coming from a Buckeyes fan. If you've got anything, Troy, feel free to add.
Will Rutgers score? That's the question. Will Rutgers score? And when will the second team play for Ohio State? I mean, that's about the only question that you're going to ask in this game. And maybe they score against the second team. But I don't know. Ohio State's second team, pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'll take Ohio State's second team over Rutgers first. Janarian Grant, I've mentioned that name. If you're watching Rutgers football, you watch him. He didn't play last week against Nebraska because of a leg injury. No one really knows exactly what happened there. No one knows exactly what the injury is. They just know it's to his leg. He's questionable for this Ohio State game. It doesn't matter if he plays or not in terms of winning and losing. But if Rutgers has Janarian Grant, I think they'll score. I'll say that much. If he's not on the field against the first team when Ohio State's truly out there to win, then I'll say, okay, Rutgers doesn't score. I'll say that much. Moving on, Northwestern at Wisconsin. And I had said before the year started that this was going to be a very interesting game because I thought Northwestern was for sure a top 25 team. Nothing more than that. I didn't think they would push the top 10, 15, but I thought they were a good football team. And they have proved that they are not necessarily that by getting crushed against Duke a couple weeks ago. But Northwestern traveling to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is 15.5-point favorites. To me, it's almost not ridiculous to say that because of how good Wisconsin has looked, because of how average Northwestern has looked. So maybe this line is right, and I think Wisconsin does win by at least 10 points. And
15's too much, Kevin. 15's too much.
Yeah.
I don't understand these guys because I mentioned it in the beginning of the show about identities. What is the Wisconsin identity? Will they be able to run the ball against Northwestern? Yep. Will they be able to move the chains? Yeah. Will they be able to control the clock? Yeah. Will it result in touchdowns? Most likely. But will it result in enough touchdowns to win by more than 15? 15 and a half, right? So to win by 16? Yep. I don't think so. Will they win by 10 or 14? I think they probably will because they'll control the clock. But I don't understand these lines, and maybe that's why they made it 15 because they kind of think that same way, that it'll be 10 to 14. If we make it 15, makes it more likely that teams will start putting some money on Nebraska and the points. But if I'm a betting guy, I might take Northwestern and the points here because I don't know if Wisconsin wins by 16. 10, 14, sure, I could see that because they're going to control the clock. That's what they're going to do. I think that line's too much, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but like you said, it can be a 24-10 football game, and Wisconsin adds a late field goal, and boop, there you go. There's the cover. I think it's fairly appropriate because I would pick Wisconsin to win by at least 2 touchdowns at home. At Northwestern, I think it's closer, obviously, but it just goes to show how lines can fluctuate based on how teams play. Land at 10 also, not to keep plugging Land at 10, but they did an article on Alex Hornibrook, the sophomore quarterback for the Badgers, and how he's been the most efficient passer in college football this year on third downs. And that's been a huge reason why Wisconsin's offense has been chugging out, 40 points consistently, is because they get it done on third down. Okay,
now you're going to start talking Wisconsin, Kevin, so now I got to chime in. Do you know why he's the most effective passer in the country on third down? Take a guess.
You got a really good offensive line, you got a really good running back, and you're playing bad teams.
Yes, and so your third downs are manageable. What happens when he's playing in Ohio State or he's playing in Michigan or a team of that caliber when it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9? He's working with 3rd and 4 and play action. I mean, again, this is coming from a true Badger fan. I love the Badgers. I love watching the Badgers. I can't wait for Big Ten play against Northwestern. But I also don't want to elevate guys more than they are. He's the most effective passer on third down because he's able to use play action, like you said, partly against bad teams, but he's also got very manageable third downs where you have, well, are they going to run the ball or are they going to pass the ball? We don't know. So when you throw in play action there, it makes the job a lot easier on third down because the linebackers can't sit back. They can't drop back into coverage. The defense has to play it straight up because they don't know. Because Wisconsin could run it on 3rd and 4. They're that good that on 3rd and 4, most teams are thinking, I got to pass the ball. Not Wisconsin. They can literally put their fist in the dirt and manhandle the other defensive line and run for 4 yards. So that's why he's the most effective passer. I think this is a guy, I like him, Kevin. I think he has a lot of potential, but he's got a lot to learn. And that's great that his stat is that. But again, stat lines can lie. And that's what I'm saying. The stat line is lying because you got to look at down and distance for this effectiveness.
I would completely agree with you. I will not add anything more on that. Maryland 2-1 at Minnesota. Minnesota's 3-0. Maryland is down to their 3rd-string quarterback. Maryland has Ty Johnson as his running back, who's pretty good. But, again, Maryland's down to its 3rd-string quarterback on the road at Minnesota, who is 3-0. They've improved as the season has gone along. I think Minnesota wins the game. I think they improve to 4-0. I don't think Minnesota is a legitimate threat to the Big Ten leaders, so to say, but I think Minnesota is a solid enough team to beat a team who's also solid with its third-string quarterback. I think Minnesota will be 4-0, but you shouldn't be insanely excited as a Minnesota fan, not to, I guess, douse on your parade as a Minnesota fan, but you should be 4-0 after this week at home against Maryland.
Yes, oh my Terps. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Minnesota, they play tough at home. It's hard to go to Minnesota and win. And now you're going in with your third-string quarterback, and I'm going to agree with you, youngster. 4-0. If I see Minnesota crack the top 25 because they beat Maryland, I may go off on a tangent next week. I really might. They're not a top 25 team. Are they on the fringe?
No.
Yeah, they are. But they're not a top 25 team. You throw them in against top 25 competition, they're going to lose as many as they win. So would that make them a top 25 team? Maybe. But if they crack the top 25 by going 4-0 and beating Maryland, there will be another rant on go big or go home by the old man.
Yeah. Understandable. I would be joining you. They play at Purdue next week. If they won that, and then they play Michigan State at home, and then they play Illinois at home, you could see, okay, 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. I think they'll be favored in every game outside of at Purdue a week from now. And even that, I think, is winnable. So Minnesota could be 7-0 going to Iowa, and then travel to Michigan. That'll be tough. Nebraska at home is winnable. At Northwestern is winnable. At home against Wisconsin to end the year will be difficult. But Minnesota could pick up a lot of victories this year, in part because of the schedule, which always plays a factor in college football. A couple games left here. Indiana at Penn State. Indiana pushed Ohio State to the limit. They pushed them until around the fourth quarter, realistically, to open the season. That was their Super Bowl, as Troy mentioned a few weeks ago. Traveling to Penn State going to be a little harder because you're on the road. People understand what Indiana is now. They understand their two-quarterback system that they have. I think Penn State gets the job done. I think Indiana's got a good defense, though. I don't think Indiana will get blown out. Penn State's favored by 17, which sounds about right. If I had to pick it, I would say something around 31-14, 31-17. So I get that. I think Indiana's solid, but at Penn State's the more talented team. They're at home. They should win fairly comfortably. Yeah,
this game at Penn State, Kevin, this 17, I just mentioned for a Wisconsin line, 15.5 was too much. 17 points, yeah, it's at Penn State. You know, again, it's that home field advantage. You go to Penn State, you go to that stadium, I mean, come on now. I mean, that is a home field advantage for Penn State. And even on a neutral site, I think they're 17-point favorites, Kevin.
Yeah, realistically, I would agree with you. Vegas would say no. They'd be around 13-point favorites. That's just the way Vegas does lines. But, yeah, I think Penn State's definitely a two-touchdown better team than Indiana on a neutral field. Lastly is Iowa at Michigan State. Iowa's 3-1, Michigan State's 2-1. Iowa's probably the better team, like I mentioned before, but Michigan State's at home. Michigan State's favored by 3.5 points. I don't know if Michigan State should be favored. I think Iowa's pretty dang good, and again, they were one tipped pass, one incomplete pass, one play away from beating Penn State a week ago. So,
how funny, youngster. How funny. Because if they would have beat Penn State, they'd be favored in this game.
Oh, easily.
So, again, it goes back. You alluded to it. A tipped pass has changed the horizon on everything. And it's just laughable to me. So why aren't you rewarded for the 59 minutes and 59 seconds that you played really tough? I mean, why are you not rewarded? There's no way in the world after watching Michigan State against Notre Dame and watching Iowa against Penn State, that you favor Michigan State. What, are you crazy? What did you light up in that room when you were making this line? Did you not watch the games last weekend? Now, again, they're college kids. They could bounce back, but come on. This one, to me, Kevin, all the other ones, yeah, okay, the line for Wisconsin, sure, okay, whatever. They could. Like you said, a late field goal, they cover. That's not unrealistic. This one, come on. Were you not watching the quality of play amongst these two teams? Iowa is better than Michigan State, and I don't care if it's at Michigan State. Iowa, to me, is at the same level of Notre Dame. Iowa's a top 25 team, even though they're not realistically, they're not in the top 5. In Old Man's book, they're a top 25 team, as good as Notre Dame. They're going to beat Michigan State at Michigan State. So this one, to me, this one could get me going, too, and I'm done.
We're both picking Iowa to beat Michigan State. I'm picking Illinois to beat Nebraska. You can put those on the board. I'm with you 100%. Win and loss next to a score means a lot more than it should. The way you play a game means a lot more, in my opinion, and Iowa should beat Michigan State at Michigan State. Michigan State should not be favored, and they're favored by 3.5. So even if Michigan State were to win by a field goal, Iowa would still cover. That's way too much, in my opinion. I am with you. Again, we're both taking Iowa, and I'm taking Illinois. That's all I got for this week.
What another great show. I really love doing this show. You know, like you said before, you were thinking, oh, we only got it. No, we don't. That's what I like about doing this show. We don't have the constraints of radio. Those that listen and listened all the way through, we appreciate it. We love our listeners. Find us on Twitter, at TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny. And actually, you can find us on our show. We have an official show handle, Kevin, at Youngster Old Man. It is very simple, but you can find it because I retweet stuff on my Twitter, TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny. He retweets the show handle. But interact with us. We really like interacting. We got one guy too, Kevin. I think he's going to start really getting into some stuff. I know that he's every other day he's out there throwing stuff at us. We both interact with him. We love it. I mean, this is all fun. Everything that we talk about is debatable. If you think I'm off my rocker or I should be in the rocker, let me know. I don't know. You know, get together. We will respond. Maybe not immediately, but I know that both Kevin and I, we love interacting with the fans. So, again, find us on Twitter. Youngster is at Kid Cunny, KIDCUNI. I am at TroyRobert967, or the show handle, at Youngster Old Man. Find us there. Other than that, Youngster, another one in the books. I love doing the Big Ten show. It's only going to get better from here on out because it is all Big Ten football this weekend. Can't wait for the show next week. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll get back with you then.